had always lived a quiet life on the remote planet of Five. His days were simple. He farmed the rocky soil, repaired his small cabin, and spent nights gazing at the stars, dreaming of the worlds beyond. Life was predictable, safe, and lonely. He had never expected anything extraordinary to touch his small existence. But that night, everything changed. A sudden blinding light streaked across the sky, followed by a deafening crash in the nearby valley. The ground shook beneath his feet and felt a strange mixture of fear and curiosity. Without thinking, he grabbed a heavy jacket, his flashlight, and ran toward the source of the noise. The cold wind cut through his skin, carrying the smell of burning metal and something strange, something alive. As he reached the crater, he froze. There, half buried in shattered rock and smoking debris, was a creature unlike anything he had ever seen. Its body was large and regal, covered in smooth, shining exoskeletons that reflected the faint starlight. Wings, delicate and translucent, lay crumpled beside her. Her eyes, enormous and multifaceted, glimmered weakly as she looked at him. Despite her alien appearance, there was a vulnerability in her gaze that struck deeply. Knew instinctively that she was in danger. He felt his heart race, not out of fear, but out of responsibility. Slowly, he approached, speaking softly. "Hey, it's okay, I'm here, you'll be safe." His words sounded almost foolish, but the alien queen, though unable to reply in any language he recognized, tilted her head and made a soft hum, a sound that vibrated gently in the air. It was her way of acknowledging him. Carefully lifted her from the wreckage. She was heavy but not impossibly so, and her limbs rested limply against him. As he carried her toward his cabin, the wind howled around them, yet felt a strange warmth. He didn't understand why, but he felt a bond forming in that moment, fragile, silent, yet undeniable. By the time he reached his small home, his chest ached with both exhaustion and a strange kind of hope. Inside, laid her on a bed of blankets, using every pillow he had to support her broken wings and damaged legs. He searched through his supplies, chemical burns ointments, makeshift bandages, and began tending to her injuries. Hours passed, the night stretching endlessly as worked tirelessly, speaking to her as if words could heal her as much as the ointments could. "You'll be okay. I won't let anything happen to you," he murmured repeatedly. Her eyes followed him, unblinking, and though he couldn't read her mind, he felt her understanding. For the first time in his life, felt completely responsible for another being. Not just a pet, not just a human friend, but something entirely different, something precious and alive. Fear and awe mixed in his chest. He thought of the stories of alien life he had read as a boy, tales of creatures both beautiful and dangerous. And yet here she was, real, vulnerable, trusting him completely. The hours slipped into morning. The first faint rays of sun filtered through the cracked cabin window, highlighting the shimmering scales of her wings. Leaned back against the wall, exhausted, and finally allowed himself a small smile. "I don't know what's going to happen," he whispered, "but we'll face it together." She tilted her head, her glow pulsating slightly, as if she understood his words, and for the first time realized that life on this quiet planet would never be ordinary again. In that moment, the human and the alien queen shared a silent understanding. A fragile, growing bond had formed, built on trust and instinct. Didn't yet know the full story of who she was or what her presence would demand, but he knew one thing for certain: he could not leave her. She was his responsibility, his charge, and in ways he couldn't yet explain, she had already claimed a place in his heart, spent the next days in a rhythm he had never known before. Each morning he rose before dawn, checking the queen's condition with careful hands, adjusting the blankets around her delicate limbs, and warming the minerals she needed to recover. Her breathing was steady now, but her wings were still fragile, bent unnaturally at the edges. Worked tirelessly, his human hands moving with gentle precision, treating each injury as if it were sacred. At first, the queen had remained still, watching him with her glowing eyes, almost like a patient observing a healer. Slowly, however, she began small movements, twitches of her limbs, tiny vibrations along her wings, and low harmonic hums that filled the cabin with soft music. Had no way to understand her language, but her sounds carried emotions he could feel. Curiosity, relief, and something deeper. A trust that warmed his heart. One evening, as the twin moons of Five rose in the sky, set up a shallow basin of water near the queen. She dipped her glowing hand into it, letting the liquid trickle over her damaged wings. He watched her closely, amazed by the elegance and precision of her movements. It was as if every motion was deliberate, a ritual of healing he could barely comprehend. Whispered, "You'll fly again, I promise." She responded with a subtle glow that brightened and dimmed like a heartbeat, and felt a thrill of connection he had never known with another being. Days turned into a week, learned to anticipate her needs before she signaled them. When she seemed restless, he would adjust the temperature, hum softly to calm her, or bring her rare minerals he had scavenged from nearby cliffs. Each gesture strengthened a bond neither of them could name yet, a silent understanding that crossed species and reason. Found himself talking more openly, sharing his childhood memories, telling stories of his lonely life, and even laughing aloud at little jokes. The queen seemed to listen, tilting her head, brushing a delicate limb against his arm, or making soft, harmonic tones that felt like applause. One day, accidentally knocked over a small vial of glowing minerals. The sound startled the queen, and for the first time saw fear flicker across her features. She recoiled slightly, wings folding tightly against her body. Instantly knelt beside her, hands open in apology, his voice steady and calm. "It's okay, you're safe, I won't let anything hurt you," he murmured. Slowly, she unfolded her wings and approached him, brushing against his shoulder in a gesture that seemed like forgiveness. His chest swelled with emotion, relief, pride, and something deeper, a stirring he could barely name. As she grew stronger, her movements became more confident. She began exploring the cabin, stepping carefully over furniture, testing the strength of her wings. Would watch from a distance, fascinated by her grace and intelligence. He realized she was studying him too, learning human habits, understanding the rhythms of his life, and perhaps, unknowingly, forming attachments that transcended instinct. He wondered if other humans could ever comprehend the depth of her awareness, the quiet wisdom in her eyes. Nights were the hardest for. He would lie awake listening to her soft hums, feeling the vibrations in the floor and through the walls, imagining what she might be thinking. He had never felt so alive, so responsible, and so connected to another being. The queen's presence was transforming him. He realized he was no longer just a man on a quiet planet. He was a protector, a friend, perhaps even something more, though he did not yet understand it. By the end of the week, the queen's glow had returned to full strength. Her wings stretched majestically for the first time, and felt a swell of pride and wonder. He knew the journey ahead would be uncertain, and that caring for her would demand courage, patience, and sacrifice. But he also knew that life with her, unpredictable as it might be, had already changed him in ways he could never undo. In the quiet of the cabin, surrounded by soft light and the gentle hum of his alien companion, realized that some connections were beyond words, beyond logic, and beyond species. They were simply life itself. Noticed the first change one quiet evening. The queen had become more restless than usual. She paced in intricate patterns around the cabin, her wings quivering slightly, and a soft golden glow pulsed across her body. It was unlike the gentle shimmer he had seen before. It felt urgent, alive, almost calling to something invisible. Watched her in fascination, concern knotting his stomach. He had never seen any creature behave like this, and his human knowledge offered no answers. He tried to soothe her. "It's okay, you're safe here," he said, reaching toward her, but she stopped mid-step and tilted her head almost as if testing him. Then she made a series of low harmonic hums, each tone vibrating through the cabin walls, felt it in his chest, a strange warmth that made his heart race. He couldn't understand her words, but the emotion was unmistakable, anticipation, tension, and something tender directed at him. The next day began to notice more subtle changes. The queen's eyes lingered on him longer than usual, following his movements with intensity. She brushed her delicate limbs against his arm more often, as if seeking reassurance. When he brought her water or adjusted her temperature, her glow brightened and dimmed rhythmically, a silent communication he felt more than saw. Tried to dismiss it as instinctual behavior, but a deep part of him knew it was more than that. Curiosity and unease twisted inside him. He searched through all his records of alien species, scanning every detail he could find, but nothing explained this behavior. It was as if she was sending him messages he could not decipher, signals designed for someone who understood her in a way no human should yet. Realized he was witnessing a side of her life that few beings, alien or human, had ever seen. His chest tightened, not with fear, but with the weight of responsibility. By the third night, the patterns of her movements had become almost ritualistic. She circled the cabin at the same pace, stopping at the corners, then stretching her wings wide as if performing some sacred ceremony. could only watch in awe. He felt a strange pull, a need to stay close, to be present, to reassure her through this mysterious, urgent rhythm. For the first time, he understood that her instincts were guiding her in ways far beyond human comprehension, and somehow he had become part of them. One evening, as prepared her food, she approached him without hesitation. Her glowing body was radiant, almost hypnotic in the dim light. She leaned forward, brushing his hand gently with a wingtip, a gesture that sent a shiver down his spine. Froze, heart pounding, but he did not pull away. He simply held her gaze, speaking softly, "I'm here. I won't leave." She hummed in response, the sound vibrating so strongly that it seemed to echo inside his bones. Felt an emotional bond forming stronger than anything he had experienced. It was not just trust or gratitude. There was intensity in her attention, a quiet claim of connection that left him breathless. And yet he did not fully understand it. The queen's hidden life cycle, the rhythms of her species, were entirely beyond his knowledge. He could not know that these behaviors were part of a sacred breeding season, a time when her species instinctively sought a protector and companion. That night stayed awake longer than usual, observing her. She rested, but her glow continued to pulse slowly, like the beating of a heart. He realized he was not merely a caretaker. He had become an anchor in her world, a presence she relied on in ways that humans could barely grasp. The feeling was both frightening and exhilarating. He had entered a life more complex and profound than he had ever imagined, one that demanded courage, patience, and the quiet strength of empathy. As the twin moons cast silver light through the cabin, sat beside her, careful not to disturb her fragile form. He reached out, letting his hand hover near her glowing wing. The queen's eyes met his, steady and unwavering, and in that moment felt a silent acknowledgement, an unspoken promise of trust and dependence. He did not yet understand the full depth of her needs, but he knew one thing. Their lives were intertwined now, in ways that would shape the future for both of them, in ways he was only beginning to sense. The days following the first signs of her strange behavior brought and the alien queen even closer. He noticed that she began following him through the cabin, mirroring his movements in ways both subtle and mesmerizing. If he bent down to repair a cracked floorboard, she lowered her body, her wings folding gracefully, observing him with an intensity he could feel in his chest. When he moved to gather supplies or water, she would hover nearby, tilting her head, her glowing eyes fixed on him. At first, found it slightly unnerving. Slowly, though, he began to feel a sense of warmth and reassurance in her presence, as if they were sharing an unspoken understanding. Started talking aloud to her more often, not expecting a reply. He told her about his childhood on the barren plains of Five, about the lonely nights spent watching the twin moons, and about the small dreams he carried despite the harshness of life. He spoke of human joys and fears, of hope and regret, pouring his emotions into words that he had long kept inside. The queen listened silently, her body radiating a soft, comforting glow. Sometimes she would reach out and gently touch his arm, her delicate fingers brushing against his skin, sending shivers of astonishment and connection through him. One morning found her arranging small objects he had left around the cabin, stones, pieces of metal, and remnants of broken tools, into careful patterns. At first he thought it was mere curiosity, a strange form of alien play. But as he watched, he realized she was observing his habits, learning his routines, and perhaps even understanding his emotions through these actions. There was a careful precision in every motion, a rhythm that mirrored his own movements. Could not explain why, but he felt recognized in a way he had never experienced with another living being. As the days continued, the queen's behavior became more affectionate. She would hum softly when entered the cabin after a long day outside, her tones low and resonant, vibrating through the floor and walls. He had no words for what she was communicating, yet he could feel a deep emotional message, relief, attachment, and something more subtle, a hint of admiration or gratitude. Began to respond instinctively, smiling, speaking softly, and moving carefully to accommodate her comfort. A bond was forming, silent but undeniable, one built on trust, empathy, and shared experience. One evening, a sudden quake shook the ground. Debris fell from the ceiling and rushed to steady the queen. She moved swiftly, guiding him away from danger with surprising intelligence and awareness. It was the first time he realized that despite her delicate appearance, she was not just dependent on him, she was capable of protecting him too. Her instincts were keen, and her reactions were precise, almost human in their logic. felt a surge of admiration for her, understanding that their relationship was no longer one-sided. They were learning to rely on each other, forming a partnership born of trust and circumstance. By nightfall, the storm had passed, leaving the cabin bathed in the silver light of the twin moons. The queen settled near him, wings partially open, radiating a gentle glow, reached out, placing a hand lightly on hers. She responded by humming a tone that resonated deep in his chest, a vibration that made his pulse quicken. In that moment, he felt a profound sense of connection, one that went beyond words or species. It was a bond of mutual understanding, trust, and unspoken emotion, a connection that made him feel both protective and vulnerable at the same time. Realized that their relationship had changed fundamentally. He was no longer merely a human offering shelter to an injured alien queen. They were companions, linked by circumstance, empathy, and an emerging fragile intimacy. She relied on him, yes, but he also relied on her presence, her quiet awareness, and the strange, unexplainable comfort that her glow and hums brought to him. For the first time, felt that his life, once solitary and predictable, was now intertwined with something extraordinary, something that challenged his understanding of connection, loyalty, and love across species. The storm came without warning. Dark clouds gathered over the valley, lightning cracking the sky in jagged lines. Had just returned from gathering supplies when the wind howled violently, shaking the cabin's thin walls. He froze, sensing danger, and immediately ran to the queen. She was already awake, wings trembling, her golden glow brighter than he had ever seen. Instinctively, knew this was not a moment to hesitate. He grabbed blankets and tied them loosely around her to keep her safe, but the cabin groaned under the force of the wind. Rain battered the windows, seeping through the cracks, and mud from the hillside began to flood the floor. His heart pounded as he lifted her away from the encroaching water, holding her tightly against his chest. He could feel the vibrations of her hums through him, fear, tension, and an urgent plea for protection. The sound resonated deep in his bones, and his resolve hardened. He would not let anything happen to her. Lightning struck a tree near the cabin, sending splintered wood flying across the yard. Shielded her with his body, ducking just in time to avoid being hit. She clung to him instinctively, wings folding around his shoulders as if seeking comfort. Could feel her heartbeat, or what he assumed was her heartbeat, in rhythm with his own. A strange, unspoken understanding passed between them. He was her anchor, her protector, and she trusted him completely. Hours passed, the storm showing no mercy. The roof leaked, water pooling beneath them, yet refused to leave her side. He whispered stories to keep them both calm, recounting memories of his home, of simple joys in his lonely life, and of hope he had carried even in solitude. She responded with subtle hums, brushing a delicate limb against his arm occasionally, grounding him as much as he grounded her. In the chaos, realized that their bond had deepened far beyond anything he had imagined. It was no longer just empathy or care. It was interdependence, a connection that demanded courage and heart. At one point, a piece of the ceiling collapsed nearby and instinctively shielded her with his body. Dust and debris fell around them, but the queen remained calm, pressing against him, trusting that he would keep her safe. Felt a surge of emotion, fear, yes, but also pride and determination. For the first time, he truly understood what it meant to be responsible for another life entirely, to protect something precious in the face of chaos. Every decision, every movement mattered. One wrong step could cost them both. As the night dragged on, the storm slowly began to weaken. Rain still fell, but the wind's fury diminished. Finally allowed himself to sit, cradling the queen in his arms, exhausted yet vigilant. Her glow had softened, but she stayed close, resting her head near his shoulder. He could feel the vibration of her hums still echoing through him, a quiet gratitude, a gentle relief, a promise unspoken yet understood. Looked down at her, brushing a damp strand of exoskeleton from her face, and realized how much he had grown to care for her. The storm had tested them both, but it had also revealed something new. Their bond was stronger than fear, stronger than instinct, and stronger than the dangers of the outside world. Human courage, patience, and unwavering care had earned the queen's trust in ways that transcended species. And in turn, her presence gave him purpose, warmth, and a connection he had never known in his solitary life. By dawn, the storm passed entirely. The valley was drenched, the cabin battered, but both and the queen had survived. He held her close, exhausted but proud, realizing that life had changed irrevocably. He was not merely a man living alone on a quiet planet. He was a protector, a companion, and in ways he did not yet fully understand, part of something extraordinary. Together they had faced chaos and emerged stronger, their bonds cemented in shared struggle and unspoken understanding. The morning after the storm awoke to an unusual stillness in the cabin. The air shimmered faintly with the Queen's glow, stronger and warmer than before. She lay quietly in her corner, her wings stretched out as if testing their strength after the previous night's ordeal. Approached carefully, sensing that something significant was about to happen. There was a tension in her movements, a purpose that he could feel but not yet understand. As he observed her, noticed subtle changes he hadn't seen before. Her exoskeleton began shedding in small, gleaming flakes, each one sparkling in the morning light. The patterns were intricate, almost ritualistic, and he realized they formed a small nest-like structure in the corner, constructed from debris, fibers, and softened leaves. His heart raced. He didn't fully understand what he was seeing, but instinct told him this was sacred, vital. He stepped back, careful not to disturb her process. The Queen rose, moving with surprising fluidity. She hovered briefly, wings fully extended, and then approached, brushing against his arm lightly. The glow in her eyes intensified, as though she were trying to communicate something beyond words. Felt it not through logic or language, but through emotion. There was urgency, trust, and a deep, unspoken plea for protection. Suddenly, he realized the truth. This was the hidden phase of her life cycle, the moment when her species prepared to bring forth new life, and he was at the center of it. Panic and awe surged through him simultaneously. He had never considered himself capable of such responsibility. The Queen depended on him entirely, not just for comfort, but for survival, for the continuation of her species. Yet fear was tempered by a strange exhilaration. Had spent his life in solitude, dreaming of courage and purpose, and now it had found him in a way he had never imagined. Over the next hours, moved carefully, anticipating her needs. He adjusted the temperature, ensured the nest was secure, and offered food and minerals she preferred. Every action required patience, precision, and gentleness. He spoke softly to her, recounting memories, humming tunes, and offering reassurance. The Queen responded in kind, her hums deepening in resonance, brushing him with delicate limbs and radiating warmth in a way that both calmed and inspired him. Realized he was learning a new form of communication, one based entirely on emotion, presence, and mutual trust. As the day progressed, the nest began to change. Tiny movements appeared within it, shimmering shapes, barely perceptible at first. Held his breath, watching as the Queen hovered over the nest, her glowing body pulsating rhythmically. The vibrations of her hums seemed to synchronize with the tiny movements below, creating a harmony that filled the cabin with life and energy. His chest tightened with emotion. He understood now that he had not only protected her, but that his care had enabled life itself to flourish. The Queen turned too, wings stretching wide, her gaze fixed on him. The glow in her eyes conveyed gratitude, trust, and something far more profound, a recognition that he had become essential to her survival and the survival of her young. Felt tears prick at his eyes. In that moment, he understood that humans were capable of remarkable acts of courage and compassion. His empathy, patience, and unwavering care had bridged the gap between species, making him more than a protector. He was a vital part of the continuation of her lineage. As the evening fell, stayed close, holding her presence gently but without touching the nest. He realized that life on 5 had shifted irrevocably. The alien Queen had revealed her hidden truth, and he had met it with bravery and heart. In the quiet cabin, filled with glowing light and harmonic vibrations, felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He was no longer a solitary human on a distant planet. He was a guardian, a friend, and in ways he had never imagined, a part of something extraordinary and eternal. The morning light filtered softly through the cabin as stirred awake. Something felt different in the air, a quiet electricity that made the hairs on his arms stand. The Queen was already awake, hovering near the nest in the corner. Her glow was brighter than he had ever seen, radiating warmth and vitality. Tiny movements stirred within the nest, barely perceptible, yet unmistakably alive. His heart raced as he approached cautiously, knowing that this moment was monumental. The first hatchling emerged like a shimmer of light, delicate and fragile, yet filled with unmistakable energy. Its wings were small, translucent, and pulsed with faint golden glimmers that echoed the queen's glow. Held his breath, afraid that any sudden movement might harm the tiny creature. The queen hovered protectively above, her gaze fixed on the hatchling, her hums resonating with rhythm and care. Felt the vibrations in his chest, a harmonic connection that went beyond species, language, or logic. More hatchlings followed, each one a small marvel of life, wriggling delicately in the nest. The queen guided them instinctively, brushing her limbs over them, communicating in a silent language of warmth, glow, and harmonic hums. Watched in awe, overwhelmed by the responsibility and beauty of the moment. He realized that his simple acts of care, his patience, his courage, his empathy, had made this miracle possible. Life had emerged under his watch, and he had been trusted to protect it. Knelt beside the nest, carefully extending a hand to gently touch one of the smallest hatchlings. It shimmered against his skin, wings fluttering faintly. A hum pulsed from the queen, soft but clear, as if she were acknowledging him, expressing gratitude and trust. In that instant, understood the depth of the bond they shared. He was no longer merely a human sheltering an alien queen. He had become part of her legacy, a bridge between species, a protector whose heart had shaped the course of life itself. Hours passed in quiet wonder. The hatchlings explored their nest, learning to stretch their tiny wings under the watchful eyes of their mother. Remained nearby, ready to step in whenever needed, his hands gentle but steady. He marveled at their resilience, the beauty of their forms, and the intelligence already shining through their movements. It was a humbling experience, one that made him feel small and infinitely important at the same time. As night fell, the cabin glowed with the combined radiance of the queen and her young. Sat beside them, exhausted but filled with an indescribable joy. The queen hovered close, brushing his shoulder lightly, her gaze steady and warm. He felt a deep emotional connection, not just with her, but with the life that had emerged through his protection and care. In that moment, he understood something profound. Humans, though seemingly fragile, carried the capacity to inspire trust, foster life, and bridge the vast divides of the universe through courage, compassion, and presence. The twin moons of 5 shone through the cabin windows, illuminating the scene like a sacred tableau. Held the queen's gaze, and she responded with a soft, harmonious hum that vibrated gently in the air. The hatchlings wriggled around the nest, exploring their new world, their wings flickering in tiny pulses of light. Smiled, exhausted but fulfilled. He realized that he had not only survived the storm, the unknown, and the weight of responsibility. He had thrived, becoming a part of something far greater than himself. In that quiet, glowing cabin, felt the true power of humanity, empathy, courage, and love capable of transcending worlds and species. He had sheltered the alien queen, and in doing so, he had become an essential part of her life and the life of her children. Together, they had faced danger, uncertainty, and the unknown, and together they had created something extraordinary. Understood then that this was what it meant to be human, not just to survive, but to inspire trust, protect life, and shape the legacy of those who could not speak in his language, yet trusted him entirely. As the night deepened, leaned back, exhausted but serene. The queen glowed softly beside him, the hatchlings nestled safely in their nest. In that moment, he knew his life had changed forever. He had become more than a man. He had become a guardian of life, a witness to the extraordinary, and a bridge between worlds. And as he watched the small creatures stretch their wings for the first time, smiled, filled with hope, pride, and the quiet certainty that together they would endure, grow, and thrive.